There it is.
It is.
All
Perfect.
right. Thank you. So welcome everybody. Deep Dive May 2026.
Yeah.
How come you picked
Wow.
elderhood as one of the eight master lessons?
Well, I would have not normally thought about it, having been a little farther from elderhood myself at that time. Maybe wasn't quite as focused as I would be today. But it was interesting to see how in the mammalian world, especially, um, the elders of different species were performing just these critical roles to keep their societies, if you will, going. And that was true for elephants, the elder matriarchs. And it wasn't just that those elders knew, say, if it was a drought, they could remember. Elephants really do have good memories. They could remember where water was 30, 40 miles away and lead their fellow elephants to it. That's great. But the elders were the ones who
Well,
were.
and not just that, 30, 40 miles away, but they would remember over many
Oh
decades.
yeah, yeah.
So it would
It,
be a
it could have
drought
been.
in 2 decades
Yeah,
there,
it could have
two
been
decades
30
later.
years earlier that they had been at that
Yeah,
water hole and they remembered it and how to
yeah.
get there. But also, they were really important for brokering disagreements, which happened among young elephants, especially young male elephants. And one of the things they noticed in Africa is tusk hunters, ivory hunters would, as you can imagine, take the elders out first because they were the ones that had the biggest tusks. So if you were an illegal ivory hunter, you would go after the elder males and females. And so they were able to study some elephant groups that had had those elders removed. And through a process that I don't need to go into, basically understood that those elephants never really developed the skills that they would have with elders' presence. For instance, they didn't know if another elephant group came by, they couldn't assess the sounds those elephants were making as being a threat or curiosity or, hey, how you doing? Yeah, come on over and say hi. They had no sense of how to interpret the vocalizations of other
Mhm.
elephants. So they were at a stress level that was very, very high. And that stress level caused them to fight with each other a lot more. And
Yeah,
so,
it sounds like it was really like social skills. They didn't
yeah,
get
yeah,
social
yeah,
skills
yeah.
because they didn't have the elder elephants to watch. In fact, when Gary first told me about this, I said, wow, this sounds like Lord of the Flies, really, in elephants.
Yeah.
There was one particular group of male elephants that was really, really aggressive and bad within the group, as I recall. Do I remember that right?
Well, there was a group of males that did not have any elders present, and
Right.
they got into, yeah, a lot of skirmishes
Right.
and so on and on with meerkats and chimps and spider monkeys and lemurs and orcas and dolphins. The dolphins elders teaching the young ones how to put a sponge on their rostra, their nose, so they could go back and forth on the bottom of the ocean and not cut their nose to pieces on the broken coral, but find sand perch basically is what they were looking to eat. Orcas, we've talked about this before, but the young, if something happens to the elder matriarch, the young males are 8 times more likely to die within a year than if that elder's present. So
Yeah, this
lots
is,
of,
I'm going to slow you down on that one.
yeah.
The orcas, the postmenopausal orcas, females,
Mm.
obviously. Um, the young male orcas cluster around these postmenopausal female orcas to essentially learn how to be
Hmm.
at all. And it is majorly, incredibly important to the well-being of the pod, to the
Yeah.
well-being of those individual whales, just to everything. We're just getting a sense of it really, in many ways, big surprise how much more sophisticated some of these animals are in their capacity to honor and learn from elders.
And I'd say the other thing you're noticing that we're mentioning quite a bit in matriarchs. Same could be said in wolf society to some degree, but that's because and Sue's heard us say this a lot, but in mammals of roughly the same size, the females are leaders are the ones that call the shots most often, as far as where the group's going to go, how the group's going to go, when the group's going to hunt. All of that really comes to down to elder females more often than males. Not that males aren't transmitting knowledge too, but the elder females. So both in the eight master lessons of nature, both elders and the power of the feminine in the natural world
Mhm.
were two different chapters in there because they're essential. And I only wish that we as humans would give both of those uh, the attention they deserve, both the respect to elders and the respect to the female, the relational skills of the females of the tribe, if you will.
Yeah, and the opportunity is always there. You know, when we developed or included the idea of the inner elder in the full ecology book, it really is a way for us to even more deeply, Sue, if you can imagine that, become, you know, because you're so deeply attached and aware of the natural world, but even more deeply connect back with our truest nature by being in a very close and attentive relationship with the natural world. The natural world is our teacher. You know, that's where we go all the time in full ecology. The natural world is also our relative. And the inner elder is the idea, it's kind of parallel to the inner child, parallel, as you know, it's an aspect of personality that many of us are never told about, that's with us from as soon as we have a sense that we are an individual separate from other individuals. So really, really early on. Um, and, you know, the signs of it are things like when you were really small and you saw, it could have been older kids, but let's just say an adult or a few adults interacting with let's say a child or another adult, but let's just say a child, in a way that was really harmful. And you could see that. And you knew that that could be done differently. And you could imagine how it could be done differently. And you had that thought, but you had no power. That thought arose from your inner elder. So this is one of those things where it's important for me to say, don't believe me, don't believe us, check it out for yourself. The inner elder is in there all the time, ready to remind you who you are and what you're really here for. And so I think my sense is that that fact, and I have observed it a lot, and I can tell you more if you want to ask questions about it. I have observed that when people pay attention to this inner guide and companion, wise guide and companion that they have their whole lives, they recognize the wisdom and guidance of the natural world more easily, more readily, because that's what part of what the inner elder points to.
Say some more about what you've seen and learned from indigenous people you've spent time with, as far as elder, the qualities of what makes a
A
literal
true
elder, a
elder.
true elder.
Yeah.
And I think the inner elder at any age leans in this direction, but
Yeah.
they were talking about.
Yeah. Well, before I do that, I will say that it's not a new concept by any means, and it's not a developmental concept by any means alone. It is very similar to the language true nature, your true nature. It is similar to still small voice, to Buddha nature, to Atman, to creator, to Sacred Heart. You know, there's all sorts of names that we have for this. However, the concept of the inner elder as an aspect of my personality, distinct from the inner elder that you would carry in your personality, because it's what's been living with me and I make sense of it and understand it through my experience and my knowing. And that's how I can listen to my inner elder. So that's how they're different from each other. But it's not like this is a new idea. It's just made more personal when we talk about it in terms of the inner elder. The inner elder is simply the reminder, like Carl Sagan would say, with billions and billions of stars, that we are all stardust. You know, it's that kind of reminder of who and what we really are. The tribal leaders that I worked with, it was interesting. I must have had, I don't know how many, probably half a dozen, maybe more, at different times. And I worked for 15 years with the tribal leadership. Um, so on that many different occasions, I heard an elder would say to me, you must remember, you must know that not all old people are elders. We honor all old people, but there is something different about elders. Elders are, and they wouldn't say, yeah, it was mine to watch. And so as I observed these leaders, especially the older leaders, what I saw was one thing that was a real example. They would not hesitate to tell the story of European contact. They would speak about that in a meeting or something. And one of the traditions among most tribes and pan-tribal situations, it certainly continues a tradition, is that an elder starts talking and you don't interrupt them. And they might go on for a really long time, and they just get to tell their whole thing, say their whole thing. So an elder might be in a meeting about governmental, tribal federal government relationships and start telling the story of contact. They would pull no punches. They would be very clear. However, we also wrote about this in Full Ecology. They were being descriptive and not evaluative. So they might be perceived by the non-native people in the room or by people with chips on their shoulders in the room as being evaluative, but that wasn't what they were doing. They were simply being clear, but they weren't pulling any of the difficult descriptions. So they would tell these stories and they would get to the end. And instead of saying what I would often hear from younger tribal leaders, which was, and y'all are jerks to the non-native people, implied, these true elders would say, and here we are all together. This is true. This has happened. Here we are all together now. What are we going to do from here? So it wasn't about vindication. It wasn't about being a victim. It was about here we are. It is vital that we show up in the best that we have to bring. So that was one thing. Another thing that I'll tell you about that came from true elders is it was very clear that they didn't need anybody in their life to go, oh, you're so cool, ever anymore. I mean, it was fine if there were accolades, and it was fine if there were criticisms. They didn't really care one way or the other. They were going to say it how they saw it, and they did say it how they saw it. And they also would come up with vastly innovative and creative solutions to all sorts of problems. They would come up with suggestions. They didn't need anybody to pat them on the back, and they might not be the best solutions for them personally. So they were thinking about the well-being of everyone first, even if it wasn't most immediately in their, say, clan or their, clan's best interest or whatever. That's what they were.
And I would say that you can sort of infer from watching a lot of the natural world that sort of generativity. How are those elder elephants acting? These lessons were, I think, a lot of the indigenous people I have known and talked to said handed to them. That's why the whole notion of anthropomorphism to some native folks is ridiculous. As one Northern Cheyenne leader told me, that's crazy. We got our qualities from the animals. So, you're this notion of anthropomorphism where I'm projecting things onto the animals that only are the province of humans seemed sort of, ridiculous to them. And you look at now, they weren't necessarily aware of this, but now we know that with the mycorrhizal networks underneath the forest and other plant communities too, those networks are essential for helping the trees communicate with each other across species. They can help provoke a response to ward off insect infestations through that network. Of course, the network now is a big deal in times of drought and wildfire because it supplies water to the trees. It also supplies nitrogen and phosphorus, while the tree is bringing carbon down from photosynthesis and giving it to the mycorrhizal network. So it's a beautiful relationship. But those older trees are the ones that are most connected to the point where when they're actually in the stage of deteriorating toward death, they'll just dump all of their precious
Mhm.
resources, usually sending it to the younger trees who might be growing in shade, for instance. If it's a ponderosa in shade, that's not ideal. So they may fortify that little tree so it has more of a chance to uh, survive. Again, I'm not suggesting that indigenous people were aware of these kind of biological relationships, but nonetheless,
I don't
I
know.
believe you can infer some of this from
Yeah.
some of the natural world.
Yeah, I remember, well, I'm going to go back to the mycorrhiza, and the older trees before they are at the point of decay and going towards death. And when they, as you say, release all of their nutrients to everybody around them and do kind of pick the ones that need it most. Before that, when they're still kind of thriving but older, they take charge. They notice when there's a little tree that's having difficulty. Plus, they do this in mixed species stands. So they don't just do it in response to other tree beings that are like them. It doesn't matter. If there's a tree of any species that's having difficulty, a young one, they send messages that say, all right, everybody, let's give a little bit of our stuff, our juice.
And they probably know that because the mycorrhizal network is telling them. I would suspect that this little tree over here is having a hard time,
Yeah,
and that information is conveyed to the trees that can do something about it. I think that the word is passed basically through those networks. But again,
that's so, but there is evidence from Samard that the older, still vibrant trees take the lead in saying
they do. But
where
I
it
think
goes.
they're all I'm saying is I think they become aware of who needs it by virtue of
Probably.
what they learn through the network.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, lots of cool stuff about elders. And I mentioned elders and feminine, the role of the females. I I honestly cannot think of two things that have put us off a path of living well and successfully and not blowing each other up and not doing all the other things we've done horrifically across thousands of years, making those two things marginal, women and the female relational perspective, I should say, which exists in men too. It's archetypically feminine.
Mhm.
To discount that as being
That
irrational and
absolutely.
not having value, and then elderhood, oh, you're old, you're over such and such, we don't need to listen to you anymore. That is cutting off, I would say, the lion's share of wisdom that is available not just to us, but a lot of life on Earth. So we've got some healing to do.
And so there is also, with this inner elder idea, that you have more resources than you think. You know, for one thing, full ecology is pointing all the time to the fact that we are in just inescapable relationship with the natural world. And so the natural world has a lot to teach us, but we got to quiet to be able to hear it, to be able to be with it. The natural world has a lot to teach us, and in that, the inner elder can be a guide to where to place our attention and what to hear. Some people might call it a higher self, but I'll tell you the story of how I found the inner elder. Um, I was teaching at Lewis and Clark College in the graduate school. And yeah, I was a professor there for 400 or 500 years. And I had hired a woman to help me with the um, psychometric courses. Not my favorites. I could do it, but they weren't my favorites. And she was great, really, really good at this stuff. And she knew how to do it in a way that demonstrated that these are tests They are not the truth.
Yeah, tell
They're
us what
ways to help us. Psychometrics are like intelligence tests or achievement tests or the Myers-Briggs or, anything, the MMPI, anything that you picked from stuff you've heard about about psychological tests or Rorschach, all of those things. And so she knew that this was only something, these sophisticated, at least mathematically, statistically, um, instruments were only tools for helping us generate next good hypotheses. They were not the truth. So I appreciated that she understood that. She was a little older than I. I wonder if she's still around. And she had been an activist in Chicago with a person called Saul Alinsky. And if you haven't heard of this person, you might want to check him out. He was quite the stunning organizer, but back in the day. So she would have been involved with him in the early 70s, late 60s. Anyway, when we were talking and she agreed to do this, and I was so pleased, she's a brilliant PhD from some East Coast place. She said, by the way, I want to let you know that I have what at the time we called multiple personality disorder. Now we call it dissociative identity disorder. And when she told me that, I just said, Arlita, thank you so much for telling me that. I just really appreciate it. It's good to know, and clearly you're living with it very well, and I appreciate your sharing that. So, weeks, months passed, and I needed to take some materials to her at her home. Drove over to her home. She lived in a little ranch house with her kiddos. And it was one, you know how ranch houses, sometimes when you go in the front, ranch style houses, when you go in the front door, it's kind of a long hallway back to the kitchen. And sometimes there are those slatted doors for closets, for like coat closets. You may be able to picture that. So we walk down that hall, we go to the kitchen, I leave all this testing material for her to use. And we chit chat, and as we're walking back out, she pointed to one of the, slatted closets, accordion kind of closets, and said, that's where I go when I need a meeting. I said, a meeting? What do you mean? She said, well, when it's getting out of hand in here, I just say, okay, everybody in the closet. And she goes in there and sits with all the parts of herself, all the personality, what dissociative identity disorder, all the different identities that she carries in her, and has a chat and says, okay, let's check in, everybody. It's been feeling a little iffy. How are you each doing? And I thought, wow, that is just so brilliant, that she really does have this way of checking in with herself and keeping herself integrated. So I got in my car, and this was probably the early 90s. And I started driving back toward home, and I started thinking, because I'm a believer that there's not a toggle switch, like you don't have dissociative identity disorder or you do have dissociative identity disorder. I'm grateful that I don't go into fugue state and have one part of my personality take over without me knowing. That would be difficult. And that's the challenge of somebody with dissociative identity disorder. But I wondered what was in there. I said, I think I'm going to go in there and check and see. And sure enough, I knew there was an inner wild child, the one that wants ice cream, no matter what, and is going to kind of cause trouble and make sure to get it. And then I knew that there was kind of an inner executive, and sure enough, there she was. And then there was an inner drill sergeant, and the drill sergeant and the wild child do not get along. And then there was an inner kind of flirt and an inner tween, really nerdy tween. And over in the corner, I saw this older woman, round with big billowing skirts, sitting there on a big ottoman, very comfortable, and watching the rest of us. And there were many more that I'm describing. And she was just going, oh, you guys, you are just such a trip. And it was that was my inner elder. And so I started just paying attention to this and seeing if in fact for me and for other people. And this is an investigation you can check with yourself if it's something you feel adventurous enough to try. But there is this just wonderful presence for me and for many that I have worked with that we don't get told about, that is there to help us through. And it's part of who we are. It's tapped in, like with the mycorrhizia.
Mhm.
It's tapped in to this essential truth of who we are. It's very organic and very consistent with the way the natural world works.
It makes me wonder, in those cultures where flesh and blood elders are respected and have a major role in the culture, if it's all the easier for somebody who's young to, if there is such a thing as going inside and looking who's in them, that they would more naturally gravitate to their inner elder by having seen an elder in a powerful role in the flesh and blood in where they live, in their family structures and their kin structures. Um, just kind of an idle curiosity, but
Yeah, and there's so much indication. I love the story you tell about the way the wolves are with their elders. And if you look at Iroquois or Nez Perce, and those are two really, the seven bands of the Iroquois are far away from the Nez Perce, and the Nez Perce are not the only ones in the Pacific Northwest who really identify with the wolves, the part about eating and the carcasses.
yeah, in one case when the wolves first came back to Yellowstone, there was an elder male, alpha male of the Delta Pack called Old Blue. I mean, they didn't really give them names; they were only referred to by number, but some of them had names that the biologists would refer to them by. And Old Blue was quite old, and you could tell because wolves are aged a lot by how worn down their teeth are, and Old Blue must have been 10, 11, 12 because his teeth were really worn down. And so the young of that particular pack, not that this would always happen, but they really, I don't think, seen it before, but because he could no longer tear open the hide of an elk that was brought down, he would stand aside and the young wolves with good teeth would come up and open that carcass and then stand back and let Old Blue eat. So there is some, even in other creatures, there's something that goes on. How consistently it goes on, I don't know, but there's some sort of impulse
To
toward,
respect
yeah, a respect, a kinship, a family structure,
and
a
honoring.
bonding. And that's really why the Nez Perce, you mentioned them, say they learned their system of governance from watching wolves, specifically from watching wolves. How they, there's leaders like the female elder of the wolf pack, if you will, would maybe call the shots, but there's an awful lot of exchange of information and allowance for freedom. You can a lot of times, if you're a member of the wolf pack and you're lower down, you can go off and do your thing and whatever you want to do, explore, and then you might be called back to because it's hunting time again. But there's a governance that's quite loose and I think quite admirable to a lot of humans, and
But
and the
if
Nez
you
Perce were among them.
But taking it back to elderhood and taking it back to the elders in the wolf pack, I mean, that's in the time that I spent with mostly with the 57 tribes of the Pacific Northwest, anytime there was a gathering, there was always food. And anytime there was food, the elders always ate first, always. So these traditions that arise from observing how the animals honor each other, and perhaps even how the trees and the fishes, there's there's so much that I learned because I was there at a time when there were discussions among these particular tribes and on up into the Alaska and Canada First Nations, um, about what traditional indigenous knowledge. And it's not like that was new to them, but they were showing to themselves how it was as viable and often superior to Western science. And there was more and more collaboration going on with Western science. And so the elders in those gatherings were speaking very directly about how I remember one man who had become a mathematics scholar on some GI Bill, telling the story about working with young people, young Native people in a college setting, so Native and non-Native people, but seeing the young Native people not doing very well. And he kind of went, I can't teach them in these Western ways. And he started teaching them in ways that were more consistent with the tribal ways. And one of the things he said when I was hearing him talk at one point was, we don't have a standard longhouse. We build a longhouse that fits with the number of people in the tribe. We don't have a standard parka. We build a parka. We don't have small, medium, and large and extra large. We build a parka based on the size of the person who's going to be wearing it. And that's an application, that's applied mathematics, is what he was suggesting, both of those things.
And I should probably go back. I want to clean something up. I'm not suggesting when it comes to wolves that the two leaders typically of a wolf pack are always older like Old Blue. They might be 3 years old, 4 years old, but there are qualities of leadership in wolves just like there are in humans. Some are way better than others. But a lot of times they were exhibiting what the indigenous people would have identified with the qualities of elders. So if they were a 3-year-old, but they were acting on behalf of the pack, doing everything they could to support the strength of the pack, it's kind of their inner elder. It doesn't really matter how old they are chronologically. They were doing things that the Nez person and really even the Sioux and other tribes identified as that's something we value and it's something we see and celebrate in what we call our elders. So,
And then tying back to the Cheyenne elder who was talking with you about how there's really, we don't understand this notion of anthropomorphism, because
yeah.
we learned from the animals how to be. Um, there's this fascinating thing that's come forward. I can't tell you exactly how long. It's only recently gotten close to popular literature. And that is that in your late 60s or early 70s, there's a part of your brain that first comes online. And some of you may have heard us talk about this before, but it's called the prefrontal, there's two parts, prefrontal orbital cortices. And the fact is it can be functional before that. But these prefrontal orbital cortices function to let you know when to worry. And so another characteristic of true elders that I saw among the tribal leaders and listed for myself as this is what they see as evidence of true elderhood
Mm.
was this thing where all hell could be breaking loose. And, it was kind of like when I went in here, and it was before I started working with the tribes that I went in, thanks to Arlita, and started looking around to see what parts there were in there of me. Um, yeah, I saw that this older woman sitting over in the corner she was the one everybody was going to look to see if they needed to panic. And that's what I saw when every 2 years, but certainly every 4 years, the tribal leadership, the elected tribal leadership was in the position of going, okay, the rules have changed. There's been another president elected. What are we going to do for tribal federal relations? And the elders would be right there to indicate the extent to which people needed to get spun up by these different issues that came forward. So that is consistent with the physiology of the prefrontal orbital cortices. And that's another aspect of true elderhood. Here's the thing, your inner elder has all those aspects. So that means that your whole life you have access to that to some extent. That really listening in. What is that still small voice saying? And boy, are we conditioned, I have been conditioned away from listening to that, getting quiet enough for that. We've been conditioned towards getting whipped around by random random by headlines that are designed to keep us nuts.
Well, and to measure our own, I think, moving into older years as like a failure, a,
Right,
a sickness, an
right,
illness that you're not
right.
going to recover from, or we're losing capacity, we're losing power, and that's so foreign to so many cultures around the world
And
that
certainly
believe that.
to the natural world.
Yeah.
It is just not even a thing. It is not a thing.
Yeah, that older elephant we were talking about earlier, she's kind of brokering when it's time to engage another elephant herd and be aggressive, when it's not. The young ones are more prone to let's rumble. And this is true, the indigenous cultures talk about how the elders were there to kind of advise the warriors, the young warriors on, okay, this is not the time to,
Mhm,
exercise that big adrenaline rush you've got going on.
mhm,
Let's wait. Let's, consider this from a higher perch, if you will. And
mhm.
that's really a mark of elderly.
And then not in every single tribe, but in most tribes, vastly most tribes, even the older true elders who are male leaders defer to the grandmothers.
Mm,
So there is still that. And that's a curious thing when it comes to the physiology from the to the prefrontal orbital cortices. What would make you there may still be enough of that testosterone kind of impulsive assertion of power over
mm.
that remains to just double check with the grandmothers
Yeah,
and see
yeah, that's good.
if it's the what's the right thing to do. Yeah.
We've been talking this
Yeah,
whole
we
time.
have. We've been given this a lot of thought. Natasha, it's good to have you with us too. It's good to see you,
Yes.
yeah, at least your photo again. What thoughts? Anything that any of you would like to add or ask or challenge
Yeah.
us
Have
on?
there been literal elders in your life or some sense of your own inner elder that have been important to you to figure out how to navigate all this?
Oh, okay. I'll lead off if nobody's saying anything.
Great,
I,
thank you.
it's been interesting, because I mean, living in the Midwest now, where I'm like, I'm within shouting distance of First Nation people now. It's a it's a whole different thing, and to have the respect that people up here have for for the knowledge and everything. And in part, I mean, there's still a lot of just regular plain old people here. But I'm like thinking back, like because I mean, I picked up my life and moved it away from my family and the technical elders back east because I am not to get too deep, too crazy, but like I could mainly like divorce myself from my parents when I was like 16. I still lived around, but it's like I realized at that point that I never was learning anything, and
Mm,
that's what hearing this discussion on learning from elders, like okay, I did have one like second father, I called him, and he passed away 5 or 6 years ago. But I mean, he led me at least with nature things, and sometimes a little bit with life and everything. But yeah, definitely we were, he was my bird watching father, as I always called him. Eh,
nice, nice.
yeah, but from the other aspect, it's like my yeah, because you're mentioning the grandparents, like my grandparents just really there was nothing passed down, and with my parents, like I always joke like the stuff my father taught me, I could use 10 fingers and have some left over. It's like I mean, it's honestly, it's like I'm joking on a dark humor here. It's just like the yeah, I'm 50, be 51 in a few days. It's like I'm like okay, I'm 51. I feel mentally like I'm ageless, and my body is kind of I was feeling better now I did a few years ago and everything. But it's like, and then look at the world now and the country and the hatred that's going on even here in Minnesota. It's like what's we've lost the plot because we start talking about with matriarchy and animals like people I'm on Instagram, people are talking about matriarchy a lot. I'm I've been talking about for years. Like now it's like, oh, people have caught up. Yeah, it's like, yes, bring that energy in, but also it's like I keep said for years too, like find another species on the planet that behaves the way humanity does. And it
Mm.
just it just you can look at almost any example, it doesn't work the same. I mean, wolves, a mountain lion will cache some food, but it won't go and kill 30 deer and cache them. It'll do what needs to be done for the time it needs to do it at. There's no gluttony, there's no, hatred and everything for the most part and everything. It's such a it's such a weird thing. So it's like, yeah, getting back to thinking the native people's ways or you know, I would say tribal ways around the world, but I've seen places around the world where the people are living in caves and have pictures and little idolatry things to the orange one up in their caves in India and Sri Lanka and over China and different places. It's so pervasive that even the old people, the elderly people in different places like that are still like, oh, we've got to have idolatry to something that doesn't serve the greater good for humanity. So
Well,
there's a few things.
Yeah, and that last example, you are being shown those for a reason. There's so few of those people. Let me go back to your Instagram comment that there are more posts coming up on misogyny and the importance of the matriarch of women. That is so. Pay attention to that. Pay attention because the the established system is aimed at telling us terrifying stories, so we will continue living, Ryan, continue living from the outside in instead of the inside out. You have been making decisions through your life, including with watching the birds and quieting down enough to see them and enjoy them, through your life to turn your attention to the inside. What's the authority in there? That is happening. And it's what it reveals is that we are connected like as if we had mycorrhiza between us. We are connected with every living thing. And that changes, as you said, did you say the plot? We've lost the plot. That changes the story, really changes the story. So I know I've said that to you again, but I wanted to say it again and underscore it. And I've said that to you before. Natasha, you're thinking of something. Hi,
Hi,
so
how are
good to
you?
see
Nice
you.
to see you guys.
yeah.
Yeah, I was listening and always so insightful as usual, both of you. And I was thinking, I feel like humans, we are so different than natural species in that most natural species only take what they need,
Mm.
and that's it.
Hmm.
And because we don't do that, we develop this conscious or subconscious greed, need for more, and then it creates financial systems that we become dependent on, like, for example, mortgages. That's a foreign concept for an animal. And so by the time somebody hits their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, if they can't contribute to the financial system, I feel like the role of the elder is
Mm.
not valued because we have so much of this unnatural financial burden, which again was put to us by society for
Mhm,
many, many reasons.
mhm,
And people are so wrapped up in just keeping their head above water that somebody who's not bringing in a paycheck or significantly contributing to something,
mhm,
that there's this inherent value tied to the elder and their financial contribution,
mhm,
which
That's
is
really well
so
said.
different than, God, the rest of the world of species. I mean, we don't see that.
mhm,
And in so many other cultures where, like especially Asian cultures, where even if you wanted to buy a $5 million house. It doesn't even exist. You
No,
can't get
really,
in
like,
over
should it?
yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
mean, you
good.
That's
it's
a good point.
harder, other than like America where we live. In Asian countries, it's a little harder to get in over your head because the same things you could be, and I use this word not as judgment to any of all of us, but we can be gluttonous sometimes. And Asian cultures don't have the same options of gluttony that
Mhm,
we do in America. And so I feel like we get tied into, oh, we have such this lifestyle and a mortgage and we've got all these bills to pay,
mm,
and then the value of the elder because they can't contribute is inherently tied, and that's
mhm,
sad, and we should learn more from animals and wolves and
mhm, mm.
such.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Sasha. That's
really,
a
thank you.
great point.
It
Yeah,
really is.
Thank
yeah.
you. Nice
Yeah,
to see you.
yeah.
And we all have an opportunity, we are in this system to a degree, so we're
Yeah,
not going to
yes,
entirely
absolutely.
escape it. However, we can decide what our priorities.
Yeah,
We can
yeah,
have a digital detox
right,
once in a while
right.
and
Yeah.
break from that series of algorithms that
Hmm.
really just and buying things I think is a
Hmm.
dopamine hit,
Yeah,
so it can
yeah,
be really, really addictive.
right, right.
Well,
That's
and
why
the
I
other
love. Oh, go
thing
ahead.
that
Sorry.
I would so imagine is true, I mean, we have the option to see somebody struggling a bit,
Mhm.
or to adopt some older people who are shut in
Yeah.
and take a little of our adulting, a
Hmm.
little of our having benefited from the system, and
Hmm.
just
Yeah,
go outside the system. And I think,
absolutely. Yeah.
Natasha, I'm curious what you're seeing down there in the South. Are you seeing people breaking from that? Because we are seeing
Yeah.
people. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really hard. People are downsizing here.
Mm,
Luckily, there's a lot of little communities where, um, like for example, I'm going to turn this around my camera, like see these little condos. I live in a semi-retirement community where you can still get a condo for $150,000.
mm,
Sweet.
right.
And so we're surrounded by options, whereas I know in some areas of the country,
Yeah.
there's not those options. So we're lucky there are little pockets here
Mhm.
still, but like
Yeah.
everywhere's changing. But people are downsizing, they're moving in with their kids.
Mm,
I have neighbors where there's, 2, 3 generations living in a 2-bedroom condo. So it's real. I mean,
It
it's
is real.
it's real.
yeah.
Yeah,
Hey,
it's real.
and is your daughter off to college? What's up?
Next year, next
Next
year.
year.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
So yeah.
yeah,
So,
blessings to her and to you.
yeah, thank you. Nice to
yeah,
connect
Yeah,
with you all
really
as
good to
usual.
see you.
for
Thank you.
sure.
Yeah, you thinking anything, Mary or Sue?
Yeah, my brain is just kind of in a space of just kind of floating in what you said, and what you shared. But I just want to just say thank you so much for your insights from both of you, and I just really enjoyed listening, and I thought it was just really good. So I do want to thank you for like your generosity of just giving such authentic insights, and just from like a lifetime of scientific knowledge and life experience, just sharing like real nuggets. So thank you.
Well, they
Thank you,
are,
Mary.
and Mary, check in your inner elder. I know I'm beating this drum a lot, but be quiet with that one. Check and see if you can find that still small voice, that one you can rely on. And the things, part of the reason, and I don't say this to slough off your appreciation. I take your gratitude, I accept it, and I honor it. Thank you so much. And you can hear what we're saying because you recognize it.
Mm.
There's something in you that knows this also.
Yes, absolutely. And I think intuitively, or just like um I get like just like I have discovered what you've described, and I've recognized her as my wise mother, which
Ah,
is the same thing. So
sure.
she's my inner wise mother, and is the mother of my parts. And I think I kind of recognized her just a couple years ago, but I
Yeah.
do know her and I can't hear her.
Wonderful.
You are a lucky woman. I'm so happy to hear that. That's great, Mary. Thank you for being here.
Yes.
And best to your partner A, is that correct? The name? I think.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. Thank
Sue,
you.
how about it? We got 4 hot minutes. Any thoughts? Don't feel pressured.
Yeah, don't feel frustrated.
Okay. Okay.
Silence is wisdom.
It is. It is. And you've got all that old growth behind you, or potential old growth
Yeah.
in the picture behind you. So you're saying bazillion words with the image.
You know, this is a really tiny story, but for some reason that we've been talking about generativity and helping to bond together, the actions of elders and thinking of others. When I was about 20, I got to know a very small group, 3 or 4 people, and they would go out to eat once in a while. And one of the things they would do consistently every time they were together is they would pick some table in the restaurant, usually a family, where they looked just really grumpy and they were not getting along well together and they were just struggling. And so they would anonymously, they would get the attention of their wait person and then anonymously buy that entire table whatever dessert they wanted. And so you could sit on the other side of the restaurant or wherever you were located and watch what happened when that wait person went over and said, well, someone wants to buy all of you a dessert tonight. So here's the dessert menu, and you just pick anything you want. And they were just astonished. And they spent the whole rest of their time together, trying to figure it out, but also just feeling like they had been blessed, somehow by that. So these little tiny things I think we can do that have the scent of elderhood to them.
That's such a great story. And Ryan, when I was saying to you, and I do say to all of you, this is the revolution. That kind of thing is the revolution. All of us paying attention to one another here on this screen, to building community as far flung as we are from each other. We're in Minnesota and California and Texas, and I think it's South Carolina, North Carolina, Natasha, and Oregon. So we're in 5 different states. So it is this community that is going to see us through,
Mhm.
and nothing can stand up. And plenty of destruction is being done. I'm not in denial of that. And blessings on everybody. And we're going to get through this, and we're going to have held, like the natural world is holding, the community, so that whether it was people who were doing harm or people who were being horribly harmed, when that resolves or does whatever it does, they have community to come back to. They all do. Natasha, you're thinking of something.
Oh,
You're muted, love.
You're
You're
muted.
muted, love. There you
I,
go.
I was just sending a thumbs up that
Okay.
I love that, you all built this community, but that there is going to be like a peace offering that comes to equalize everything that's happened, and that it's hopeful when you say, to hear it from you, it gives me hope. So thank you.
Yep.
That's all.
You're welcome. Natasha, you are not alone. None of us is. The mycorrhiza, even if it's just metaphorical, and I'm not sure it is, that connects the trees,
Yeah.
is connecting all of us. And what
Right.
we're
Right.
learning is that a lot of it is in our neural co-regulation.
Mhm. Yeah.
That we are really connected. Plus, then all the thing in consciousness studies from physics and cosmology. There's just all this validation. So
Yeah.
we are doing it.
Yeah.
I'm so
Yeah.
happy
No,
to
I
see
love
you.
that you make it easy to understand also how intricate it is. So thank you for
Yes.
your work. I always
Oh, of
appreciate it.
course. Of
Thank
course.
you for being.
It is such a joy to be with you.
Thanks.
Yes, and Zach, is that you? I think it is. I think that's Zach. Is that you? Is that, do I have his name right? Of Zach and Trish?
I think so. Is that you?
Let me try this.
Gabe,
there you
Gabe, I called you Zach. Sorry.
Like,
Listen, we are at the
I'm-
end of our time, Gabe.
really?
You came in an hour late. Yes,
Is it because of Arizona?
it is because of Arizona love.
Ah,
I know.
I'm so
I
sorry.
know.
We
So
did record it.
I promise I will send you the recording, or we'll put it up
Okay.
on YouTube so you can get to it.
Yeah, we're so
Okay.
sorry to miss you.
Aw,
well, it's great to
please-
see you for a minute.
Yes.
Well,
Well, I hope
likewise.
you and Trish hug each other for us.
We will.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks
All
for
right,
all.
everybody. Thanks for being here. It's
Thank
always
you.
great to have
And
time.
Gary, thank you for the New York Times opinion piece.
Oh, I'm glad you saw that, Sue.
Yes,
Times yesterday.
Glad you
Yes.
saw that.
Wow.
Yeah.
that's a big deal. Thank you.
Yeah.